get started. So I decided to do this week a commandment that we don't talk about as much because it seems like, well, what am I supposed to do about that anyway? Which is the whole idea of the court system. But in looking through the laws, I thought there were some points that were relevant. Relevant and that hopefully can apply to our lives. So that's why I started with. So this is the 7 of the 7 laws of Noah. This is the law of establishing laws and courts. So this obligation is on society. Society's group of people have to establish the law, all the Noahide laws through the court system. And throughout wherever Noahides live, if they have the ability of self-rule, of self-government, if they have self-government, which of course now we don't have, but if there was self-government, if there were a group of Noahides living together and they could create government over themselves, they're supposed to create courts, and those courts are supposed to educate and enforce the Noahide laws. So that's the first thing those courts have to do. They have to enforce all the other 6 laws. This is the 7th law to enforce the other 6. Also, those courts should enforce all the other laws of this society, because obviously, beyond the Noahide laws, there are other moral laws that a society will make to govern itself. And as long as those laws are consistent with the Noahide laws, that's totally fine. Laws to create social order, laws to disallow disorder. Every society has the right to make such laws as long as those laws are consistent, as long as they're aligned with the Noahide laws. And then beyond laws you make with your own human brains that are consistent with the philosophies of the Noahide laws, societies could choose to say, we want to go even stricter than just what normal human moral ethical conduct would demand. We want to model our society after the Jewish law. So a Noahide society is allowed to do that, meaning whatever the laws are, they're not specifically part of the Noahide laws, and therefore not obligatory on Noahides, like all the laws of trying to think of things that are totally nothing to do with the Noahide laws. Of course, the law does have to do with the Noahide laws, but laws of the details of responsibility in borrowing, in lending, in renting items. So in the Torah, in God's laws to the Jews, there's a lot of very strict laws there, which a Noahide doesn't have to adopt. But a Noahide society could choose to adopt those laws if they want to, but they don't have to. But if they choose to, then those are part of the laws that will be enforced by the court system. So the court system, so again, if we can imagine this ideal society, God willing, what it'll be like by the complete redemption, right? The world's gonna be a world of Noahides. So will there be court systems? There will be court systems. What will the courts be doing? Enforcing the Noahide laws, enforcing any other moral laws, any other societal laws that are man-made but consistent with the Noahide laws. And perhaps, if the people have chosen this, to also enforce any of the other laws God gave to the Jewish people, if the Noahide community wants to adopt those laws, those types of justice, which they don't have to, but if they choose to, then the courts would also govern those laws. So, of course, when we have the complete revelation of Mashiach, we could say, what do we need a court system for? Everyone's going to be good, which is true. But that doesn't mean we might not need courts still to say business, property, all of these things to work out the details for us. And as long as, again, if these are details that the Noahide laws don't govern, the societies can make up their laws as long as they're consistent with the Noahide laws. And then the courts will govern those laws. So obviously then the judges and of course the lawmakers and the enforcers of the law all have to be very aware of the Noahide code. And again, in this dream society, imagine living in a country of Noahides, run by Noahides, laws created by Noahides, laws enforced by Noahides. So the Noahides that are the most knowledgeable in the whole Noahide code are going to be the lawmakers and judges and law enforcers. Well, what if new issues come up? What if there's a situation that there's no laws about and they want to make laws? So then the lawmakers, the Noahide lawmakers could turn to rabbis, expert in the Noahide laws, to consult with them about this new situation, just like nowadays. There's so many new situations that weren't discussed in the Talmud. They didn't exist in the Talmud. But based on what is written in the Talmud and predating the Talmud and post the Talmud, the rabbis today, looking at what came before, looking at the approaches, they take the current modern phenomena and evaluate them based on the criterions that were laid out thousands of years ago for other comparable situations. So that with the same idea, in a Noahide society, if there's new situations that arise that you're not sure how this works within the Noahide code, then you turn to rabbis who are very steeped in the Noahide laws to know how this new situation fits within what's already been laid out by centuries before the rabbis in discussing the Noahide code. Now, the reason why it's so important that the judge, so we understand why the lawmakers have to be very steeped in the Noahide code, because they're making the laws. So they have to make them as per the Noahide code. But also the judge has to be very steeped in the Noahide code. And we're going to speak quite a bit about the judge tonight and ourselves as judges in our situations. Because, I mean, for sure in America, if any of you have ever have any relationship with the court system in America, you know the judge has an enormous amount of power. And a judge, his own personal value judgments, his own belief system is going to be how he interprets the laws. Obviously, there are many laws that America permits nowadays that are totally contrary to the Noahide laws, but they're the law because judges that were not steeped in the Noahide laws, but steeped in some of the culture out there in America, looked at American law and through the prism, through the vantage point of the popular culture that they were very, very immersed in, they found things in previous laws to defend judges they meant about things that are very, very forbidden by the Noahide laws. So that's why a person, not only does the lawmakers have to know the Noahide laws to make the correct laws, but the judge has to really be immersed in the Noahide laws as background for judging ethically, for judging morally, for making sure all of the God's laws and also the man-made human laws are all being enforced as per not just the letter, but the spirit of the Noahide laws. It's forbidden for a judge to pervert judgment, to convict anyone who's innocent, to vindicate someone who's guilty. And you're also, Jewish law is very stringent that there has to be very strong proof before someone could be condemned as guilty. Meaning, if you know the person's guilty, but you don't have the proof that Torah demands, you cannot in court say he's guilty. And if a judge would do any of these things wrong, if a judge would convict someone who's innocent, if a judge would vindicate someone who's guilty, if a judge would condemn someone with insufficient evidence, if a judge would pervert the justice because he wants to gain favor from a defendant, if he does any of these things, he is transgressing this Noahide law of courts of justice. So the one that could most transgress is the judge. because he's the one that has to enforce these laws. Obviously, as I said, for us individuals that don't live in a Noahide world, that God willing will be very soon with complete revelation of the redemption of Mashiach. At the moment you don't, you can be, well, what does that have to do with me? I'm not a judge. I'm not a lawmaker. I'm not a law enforcer. I live in America or in Canada, and no, our law system is not Noahide. So what am I supposed to do about this? But I think understanding some of these perspectives on how to enforce justice, we can apply to our own lives. So, for example, one of the things on a judge, which is also on a Jewish judge and also on a Noahide judge, is thou shalt not respect a great man. Now, what does that mean? That means if two people come before a judge, one is very rich, very wise, one is very poor and very simple, it's forbidden for the judge to say, this person's so rich, so honorable, so wise. This other person's so simple. For sure, this wise person is innocent or is right. And even if as a court case goes out and the judge actually sees that the poor simple guy is in the right here, it's not right. I'm going to say this nice, honorable, rich, wise person is wrong. I'll say he's right, and then afterwards I'll tell him privately, really, you were wrong, but I just didn't want to embarrass you in court. So whatever, make it up to this other poor simple guy. That's fine. No, that's completely forbidden. You can't look at someone and say, because they're rich, I'm going to favor them. I'm going to give them more honor. I'm going to give them more respect. Or because they're smart, I'm going to give them more honor, more respect. Or because they come from a noble family, I'm going to give them more honor, more respect. Because they have a beautiful reputation, because they have a very honored place in society. When you look at two people, you have to look at them equal. And even though this other person, rich, wise, noble, wonderful person, has lots of very real values, like he truly is a much better person than the other person, it's got nothing to do with it. That's got nothing to do with it. When you're judging people, when you're treating people, you have to put including all the advantages on the side and treat them equally. So I thought that was a very powerful lesson for ourselves, because we all are judges in our own arenas. So does that resonate? Does anyone here feel like, yeah, I'm sometimes a bad judge? I sometimes favor people, maybe because they're rich, maybe because they're smart, maybe because they're honorable people in my community, and I sometimes am nicer to them than I am to someone else. Or not? What do you think about yourself in terms of your own reality?
I think that's a really interesting thought process and question, because I think we all have internal biases that we may not even be aware of.
Yes, that's a very beautiful way to phrase it. Christelle said that very beautifully. We all have an inner bias that could be very subconscious, but we might have a bias that we're nicer to nice people. You know, we could have a bias that we're nicer to our friends. We could have a bias that we're nicer to our child's friends' parents. You know, we have biases, we do. And that's exactly, Christelle got to the core of what this law is demanding of us. That we really have to be honest with ourselves and really demand from ourselves that it's wrong to treat people differently, even though you can say, but they deserve to be treated differently. But we should really, really, really give everyone respect. Give everyone our full attention. Give everyone the benefit of the doubt. And not only the nicer people in our world, or the more honorable people in our world, or the smarter people in our world, or the richer people in our world, but everyone in our world. Anyone has worked on themselves in this area? Has any tips for the rest of us on how you do this?
I think for myself, like I I feel like I have done work in this area, but I feel like for myself, it's just, making myself aware of what those biases are, is the biggest point. Because I mean, a lot of times if you don't understand that you have them, then you're not even aware of them. You have no insight. And so then you can't have better judgment, but once you have insight of, what your preferences may be, subconsciously or consciously, that's the only point in time in which you can, address your judgment.
That's so true. That's so true. So what Christelle is saying is preliminary step one is very honestly looking at yourself and saying, what's my slant? Because of course I have one, because all humans do. It doesn't mean my slant is bad. Well, we're looking at this judge here. We're not saying he's favoring wicked people that he's scared of. He's favoring good people, honorable people, maybe powerful people, a wise person over a simple person. That's such a normal bias. And honestly, a rich person over a poor person is a very human bias. Not that you're expecting to get any money from him. It's just a bias we have. Oh, they're rich. By definition, we think they're, I don't know, they must be smarter or something, that they were rich and we're not. So, we sort of give them a certain natural honor if they have that richness. So I think what Christelle's saying is a very, very wise way to look at it. At first, to look at ourselves and to really understand how we are biased, what our bias is. And once we're aware of it, then we can watch ourselves and make sure we don't trip over it. And make sure we're not being unfair to someone because they don't fall into any of those categories that I'm naturally slanted to. I mean, it's sad to say, but even people's physical appearance, it really sometimes slants. I was speaking to someone today and she said, whatever, she's new to town. She doesn't feel people are so nice to her. And she's such a nice person. And I'm thinking, well, she's overweight. And it's sad to say, but maybe someone that just looks at appearances, they just dismiss her because, I don't know. I mean, I hope that's not true. And I'm not saying it is true because I've never seen her interact with other people. I just know her one-on-one with me. She's a very lovely person. But she doesn't feel warmly welcomed by people. And I was really thinking in my head, like, I wonder if people, subconsciously, of course, subconsciously, nobody consciously would treat someone different. But subconsciously, is there a bias? Does society create a bias based on how you look? For sure, society has a bias based on how much money you have. But even something much more subtle than that, like how you look, is there a bias society has that a nice person very subconsciously could not treat someone the way they deserve? Something inside of them is like sort of looking down on the person. That's a horrible thing. And if you told anyone that, they would of course say, no, I mean, that's horrible. I would never do that to anyone. But like Christelle is saying, our biases could be very, very, very subconscious. Be very unaware of it. And, we really have to look to be very careful. Are we subconsciously diminishing some people in our eyes because of whatever reason? And then we just sort of treat them differently. Not that we would think we do, but we honestly do. Now, something else I was thinking along these lines, like with your children. If you have children, do you naturally, if you have more than one child, do you favor like the good kid? If you have children and one is just in general better behaved, more polite, more compliant, more respectful, and do you have just this bias that you sort of subconsciously always assume they're right, always assume they were innocent, which might not necessarily be true. They could be nice and respectful and well-mannered and still have whacked their sibling. And I've seen it plenty of times. But we sometimes just fall into that bias of like, well, that's how I look at this child. He's the good one. She's the good one. He's the one I can rely on. He's the well-behaved one. So it's hard for us to really process that they're also normal and human, and as kids, they might be the ones that were wrong in an altercation with another child. Obviously, a lot of us have biases of our children versus anyone else's child in the world. And therefore, when our child and another child of a different family something's going on, I mean, most of us, just being normal, automatically favor our child, automatically assume our child is right and the other kid's wrong and the principal's wrong and the teacher's wrong and the other kid's parent for sure is wrong. I mean, we're human. We naturally are biased in terms of our own child most of the time, for most of us. So it's really asking, because look at like what the law is. The law is saying you have someone in front of you and he's the better person. And you know he's the better person. He's the more honorable person. So you're like, okay, I know in this case he's wrong, but I'm just going to make him right. And then afterwards I'll tell him, you were really wrong. You really owe the other guy the money. Pay him. I just didn't want to, like, in court say you were wrong. And we're told that's a perversion of justice. And such a judge is wrong. And such a judge is sinning against the Noahide code, against God's law. Because God is saying we have to treat every person the same. We have to give everyone equal chance in judgment. You know, we have a lot of courtrooms going on in our own brain. We're judging people all the time. And it's really asking us, this law, I thought was very relevant, asking ourselves, how fair am I in my judgments? And how much am I preconditioned by qualities that I think are good, qualities that I think are important, things that impress me, and therefore my judgment's skewed. I don't think it's skewed against good people, but that doesn't make a difference. The judgments can't be skewed, including they can't be skewed so you favor good people. That's also skewing the judgment. I thought that was an interesting thought. I just pulled out some of these laws here that I thought were interesting and relevant. Bribery, of course, a judge is totally forbidden to take a bribe. According to the Noahide laws, if a judge took a bribe, he's not obligated to return it because it was given to him as a gift. But so the society could make laws. Again, the Noahide laws aren't demanding him to return the bribe. Society's legal system could create a law that the bribe should be taken away. And that would be a very appropriate thing to do, even though the Noahide law is not demanding it. So that's an example of where the society can create laws that are not directly laws of the Noahide laws, but that are in connoissance, in alignment with the Noahide laws. But whatever law a judge passed after he took a bribe, whatever judgment he created after he took a bribe, that judgment is for sure nullified, rescinded. And that person is removed from his position as a judge, and that person is punished for taking a bribe. So he might not have to give back the bribe. That depends on if society made that law or not. But whatever he decreed is off, is nullified. He loses his right to be the judge, and he's punished because you're not allowed to take a bribe. He was going against the Noahide laws by taking a bribe. So again, you see here so much weight on this idea of taking bribes. And then you ask yourself, am I in situations sometimes where people bribe me? Maybe they bribe me with flattery. Maybe they bribe me with gifts. Do I ever take or do I ever give bribes? Because we see from these laws that to God, that's so distasteful. God doesn't want us to give bribes to people. God doesn't want us to take bribes from people. You know, like, people in authority should not take gifts from other people, because that automatically, going back to what Christelle was saying about our very subconscious biases, that automatically creates a certain bias in your mind towards that person, even though you're not meaning to have that bias. You're not thinking you're biased, but a gift is a bribe and it creates a bias. So again, like thinking, well, nobody ever gives me gifts, but thinking like, sometimes people say things and then does it change how I look at situations? We're very, very vulnerable, just like we're very vulnerable to gossip. We like to think we're not, but we really are. When we hear gossip about someone, very subconsciously, perhaps, consciously we say, well, that's just gossip. I don't know if it's true or not. I can't accept it. But subconsciously we accept it and we're affected by it. And we look at the person differently because of it. So it's very similar when someone is bribing you one way or another, flattering you, convincing you, whatever. It's very easy to be affected by that. It's very, 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 very easy. So we said that just as it's forbidden for a judge to take a bribe, it's forbidden for a person to give a bribe. Because if you give a bribe to someone, you're causing them to transgress and pervert the judgment. So when you bribe the judge, I'm innocent. I just gave the bribe. No, you're guilty because you caused someone else to mess up. You are literally transgressing the Noahide law. And again, you're saying, well, nobody ever gives me bribes and I never take bribes. But again, bribery can be very subtle. For a judge, if you paid a judge's debt, that's a bribe. If you gave the judge a gift through someone else, that's a bribe. Obviously, nowadays, it seems all over the world, for sure in America, for sure in a lot of other countries, all these bribery is being exposed, how all these politicians are like being given so much enormous. You say, why is someone going to politics? They don't make that much money. They make a tremendous amount of money because of all the bribery they get. Today, in our society, there's so much bribery going on to get people to make the laws or to have people appoint people into power. It's a very, very, very prevalent thing. So we know it's in our world. The question is in ourselves. Christelle?
May I ask a question? So I used to work, I used to know people, and they talked about like one of the things that they did at work to kind of, that they did it as a nice thing, but it definitely, helped them, I think. They would bake things all the time and take them to work. And everybody loved them because they baked really good food. I mean, so
would they specifically share it with their boss or would they share it with everyone?
I mean, they shared it with everybody. I mean, and so is that okay?
So what was their intention in doing that?
They like to bake and they like to eat the baked goods, but it also was like, it was, it was something that they did that other people enjoyed, that they worked with. And it was a way to break the ice. It was a way to, bring people together. And of course, since they were the ones that baked the goods and everything, it made them somewhat popular, I guess.
I would look at it like this. That's a great question. Based on everything you're saying, it's okay.
Okay.
Because what you're saying is they were doing it to create a warm atmosphere. They like to bake. They like to eat.
Well, we like to
share their food, and other people like to eat. And they also like to create a warm energy in the office, and that all sounds fine.
Okay.
But if they baked and gave to their boss, that would be a problem. That would be a problem. That would be a bribe. But if they're baking and sharing with all their coworkers, their boss also eats, but so does the janitor. It's just to create a nice atmosphere and have everyone enjoy food. Like you're baking, you gotta have someone eat it, right? It's only so much room in your freezer. So, excuse me. So I don't think that's a problem at all. But giving gifts specifically to your boss because you want to get something from it, that will be considered a bribe. And that will be a problem.
Thank you for the clarification.
Now, obviously, that doesn't mean one can never give a gift to a boss. You know, if it's office culture that at this point we all give each other gifts, whatever, you're giving gifts to everyone, you're allowed to. That's not a problem. If it's considered a nice thing and like I'm like, let's say, I know for myself, I'll try to, at certain points in the year, give gifts to my son's teachers and the aides and bus drivers. I mean, no bus drivers this year because of COVID situations, but I'm not trying to bribe them. I don't want anything out of it per se. I'm just trying to be nice and appreciative and say, you know, I know you work hard. I know whatever. I know, you know, it's not easy, you know, being a teacher, being an aide for sure. Whenever I give a gift, I try to give all the aides gifts because I'm sure people don't always think to give the aides gifts. A lot of aides in the classroom for special needs kids. And it's my way of saying, I appreciate what you do. Thank you. That's totally allowed. That's not a bribe because there's no covert or overt intention here of getting something out of it. Now, if all the kids were trying to get a part in the school play and, you know, the day before the teacher picks the parts, you give her a nice gift to show your appreciation, that sounds like a bribe. That sounds like you want your kid to get the part. And so you're giving a gift with that intention. Yeah, that's wrong. Oh, come on. No, that's really wrong. That's really bribing. That's really wrong. But if it's a general present to show appreciation, and especially if you show appreciation to maybe people at your work that generally people don't get appreciation, people forget about them, that's a beautiful thing to do. That's a nice thing to do. That's a courteous thing to do. So you really have to look into like, what's the intention behind it? And that's why when Christelle said her point, I asked her to talk more to understand, like, why is the person giving this cake? But based on everything she said, it sounded very nice. You know, very innocuous, very nice, very positive reason. So that's not a problem. So a person shouldn't say they can't bring gifts to people. But you have to really be honest with yourself. What's my intention behind the gift? That's what you have to evaluate. And that's what really determines, are you allowed to give the gift or not? Now, let's flip it the other way. Let's say you are that teacher. And it's the day before you announce the parts in the school play. And a parent comes with a nice gift of appreciation. It's a little awkward moment there. But you're really not supposed to take it. But I know it's a bribe and I'm not planning on giving her kid the part anyway, or I was anyway planning on giving her kid the part. No, we're told you cannot take this because it's very subconscious, the influence. Even if you're like laughing at her thinking, that's so silly, I already figured out the parts. It's very, very subtle and subconscious how we are affected when someone gives us a gift. And that's why, of course, you don't want to be rude. So you have to think of a nice way to not accept a present, but you can't give bribes and you can't take bribes. So you have to really, really, really be careful. So on a similar note, we're told that a judge is not allowed to charge money from the litigants when he's judging them. Because again, if he takes money from them, one person give him more money, one person give him less money, that's, well, I charge money and I say, give me whatever you want. So you're already setting up a scenario there of bribery. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean he can't receive money for his work. And in a Noahide society, the society should pay the judge and should pay the judge well. So he shouldn't even be in a situation where he's needy and therefore more susceptible to bribes. I mean, it's a very normal thing to bribe a judge. So that's why we're like little judges. The real judge, it's a real normal thing to bribe the judge. So that's why society truly should pay the judge as well. So they're not dependent on gifts from other people. Now, if the way a society did it is they said, everyone pays a flat rate. When you're judge, both sides pay the same amount, and that's how the judge gets paid, then it's okay. because then there's no bias. They're both paying me the exact same amount. That's fine. That's not considered a bribe. Well, I'm getting money. Well, I'm getting the same amount of money from both of them. So that's fine. But if it's like an open-ended, pay me whatever you want, no, that's a very, very, very unsafe situation. And that is not allowed. And if a person would do something like that, that would be going against the Noahide laws. Now, whatever the payment is, now sometimes, I mean, this happens today. I don't know if any of you have ever been in a situation of like, I forget what it's called, like mediation, where the judge is like mediating between the two sides. It's like unofficial, meaning you don't have to accept it, but he's like the mediator, and you do pay the judge, and both sides pay the judge. It's like a private court case in a sense that you're both sort of signing to, that you're agreeing. So it's not within a court system where he's getting paid by the government. You're literally personally paying him. So are you allowed to do that? You're allowed to do that if both sides pay the same amount. If we're paying up front, you know, we're paying publicly, there's nothing secret, covert going on here. So that's not a problem, because then again, there's no bribery within this. It says the best thing is to pay in advance, and both sides should pay in front of the other. So it's very clear we're paying the same amount, and this is not affecting the judgment. But in many cases with like arbitration and things like that, that is exactly how it's set up today. Sorry, can't see over here. Now, within our own life, talking about this idea, have you found yourself sometimes just naturally biased towards someone who's paying you your salary? And well, some people say, no way, my boss. No, I know him too well. I'm very not biased for him. But other people, like if you, especially maybe even if it's not like a boss, but you're self-employed and you work for people, have you seen in altercations that when someone's paying you, even just paying you a salary, that you have a sort of a natural bias towards them and think they're right more naturally? Now, this might not pan out in your world because you could be like, no, I know that client and they're very difficult to deal with. And if anyone was saying anything bad about them, it's probably true. You know, so it doesn't always pan out this way automatically, that if someone's giving you money, like in that relationship, you naturally are biased towards them because you might know them well and know parts of them that will make you feel they might be wrong or they probably are wrong. But if you don't have those negative innuendos, you don't have that extra negative baggage, the mere fact that someone is paying you on a regular basis money for a service, it's not a bribe, it's not a gift. They're paying you money, you do a service for them. But the mere fact that you have that type of relationship with them already subtly could be causing you to favor them, could be causing you to think they're right over another person because you receive income from them. Now, again, they're not giving it as a bribe. You're totally allowed to take it. It's income, you're working. But there could also be a subtle impression, a subtle pressure of the relationship that you have because you receive money from them. So that doesn't mean you're not allowed to receive money from them. I mean, I think you're allowed to be self-employed, or you're allowed to work for a person, you're allowed to receive a salary, you're doing honest work, you can get honest money. It's not a problem at all. But going back to what Christelle said, it's being aware that I might have this bias merely by the fact that I'm receiving money from this person. It's not a gift, it's not a bribe, it's a salary. But merely by that fact, maybe I have a bias. And we always want to check ourselves and really see, do I have this bias or do I not have this bias? Now it says that a judge is allowed to take payment for any extra expenses. He could demand from whoever's paying the judge, you know, society, the government. He needs extra money for something in his upkeeping his office, and that's fine. But if the judge gives undue raises to his assistants or liberally increases expenditures at the expense of somebody else, the public or the private people that he's being paid by, this person, it says, is greedy, and this is disgraceful. It was very interesting to me reading this because I was thinking of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, that very often I've heard this comment that the Lubavitcher Rebbe here is the leader of world Jewry. And for years, the Rebbe would 3 nights a week have private audiences with anyone that wanted to have an audience. As long as they booked it enough in advance, you could come and have an audience with the Lubavitcher Rebbe. If you're willing to be there at like 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. or whenever your term comes, you can have a private audience with the leader of world Jewry. And many, many people that went to the Rebbe for the first time, I mean, there are certain like standard comments that many people walked away with because it's just sort of, it's just so obvious. So one of the comments that was very standard by someone for the first time coming to the Rebbe was, he was overwhelmed by the simplicity of the Rebbe's office. Or if they would go downstairs to pray in the sanctuary, in the synagogue of the Rebbe, overwhelmed by the simplicity of the sanctuary. And I've seen and heard and read that comment so many times. It's just like one of these standard stock phrases. Like the Rebbe's office is so simple. You go into the leader of world Jewry, you see literally like a big desk and bookshelves with lots of books. No fancy trappings at all. And when I was learning this law, I was thinking of this point that we're being taught here, that the judge should not say, well, I'm a judge, so I should make sure I have leather chairs or nice new bright lights, or, I mean, I'm a judge. It's like giving honor to the office. It's giving honor to law. It's giving honor to the country. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe never looked at it that way. He looked at it like very simple, very simple. His house was very simple. His office was very simple. His synagogue was very simple. No external trappings were needed to give honor to the office or the person. And this is really what we're being told here about the judge, is it's wrong, it's disgraceful, it's greedy for a judge to say, I need more money to upgrade, to renovate, to redo, to make it fancier and nicer and more important looking, as many people do. Many people pour a lot of money into synagogues and offices and things a lot of that sort because it's respecting, the office. But the Rebbe never had that perspective. And I was thinking of it very strongly when I read this law. So why do you think the sages say it's greedy and disgraceful? Why do you think they say it's greedy and disgraceful? Now, the judge's not doing anything illegal here. There's no bribery. But it says, if the judge is saying, I need more money because I have to give everyone in my office a raise, I need more money because we have to spend more on this or spend more on this for the office of the judge. I mean, I'm the judge. I'm enforcing the rules, and I need more money for this, and I need money for that, and I need more money for that. Sages said it's greedy and disgraceful. That's very harsh language. Why do you think they use that terminology here when they're talking about the judge specifically behaving in this very human way? Any thoughts why they would say it's greedy and disgraceful?
Yes, because it gives the appearance of of a higher class than everybody else. Not humble. It's not a humble thing.
Exactly. It's such a strong point that, and again, it's very counter our world, because this is how our world is, very normal in our world. But what Torah is saying is, the higher your position, the more you're supposed to be a servant to the people. You're supposed to look at, and it's very easy. A leader, a judge is an example here of a leader, right? Of an authoritative person, of a judge. That's like, anyone's son can be a lawyer, right? As long being a judge. So it's very easy. That's a position of a lot of power, of a lot of authority. And a person in that position, exactly like Dixie is saying, has an extra onus of being humble, has an extra onus of reminding himself, I serve. A lot of people spout it as lip service, but that's literally, in Torah perspective, what a leader is. A leader is a servant of the people. Like, if we want to go very spiritual, God's energy of sovereignty has nothing of its own. It's completely devoid of anything. It's just expressing other energies. That's the idea of sovereignty. That's the idea of a ruler. So if someone is saying, well, I'm so important, so my office should be redecorated. I'm so important, I should get new furnishings. I'm so important. This is such an important office that I importantly have. And therefore, it's like, whoa, you're off. Because your perspective should be, I am here to serve. My role is to serve the people. That's how a king's supposed to look at himself. That's how an officer is supposed to look at himself. That's how a judge is supposed to look at himself. And it's a very strong lesson for us in our reality. I think how this impacts our life. Really, really absorbing this lesson of whatever powers we're given, whatever gifts and talents we have, and therefore whatever powers we're given because of that, to always keep in mind, like, the more power, it just means the more responsibility. The more authority, the more servitude. Because if I'm given authority, it's to serve. If I'm given power, it's to serve. And like Dixie said, just staying humble, staying discreet, staying modest. Because otherwise, you lose it. And you forget that you're there to serve, and it becomes a you trip. It's all about you. Even if you think you're very wise and very knowledgeable and humble and moral and only going to make the right judgments, but once it's a you trip, you're off. Does anyone see in their own life situations where this applies? Where they can see that correlation of, like, power, authority, and staying in alignment with, it's about servitude. It's about giving to others. It's about serving others.
I think the sense of what is enough, like, you want to talk about biases and everything. It's like whenever you move and you're trying to look for a house, it's like, that's whenever, it comes out, like, where you feel more comfortable, what your preferences are, and so on and so forth. But I think, what is enough, and living life, at your means or below your means or something to that extent, maybe. I'm not certain, but I know I make that, like, there's some things, like, with, like, the yard or the house, like, I like to garden and stuff. And so, sometimes with the yard, I mean, I could get carried away and have, like, a whole Waldorf, like, like kinder, like, garden, like, with fountains. And I mean, I could do all of that and love it, but it's just like, obviously that's an expense, and it's, not an expense that's necessary. And so, I find myself like, this is enough. This is enough, and I have to do that with myself quite a bit. Like, okay, this is enough, and this is good enough. And then, move on.
or creating those limits that nobody else is imposing on you, but you're imposing on yourself.
Right. Yeah.
That's definitely an area. I think also as a parent has a lot of power
Oh, yeah.
over a child. It's a lot of power in that relationship. And to really stay focused on your role of educating the child instead of the power you have in that situation, which there's a lot of power there. And again, I mean, I don't mean in any crazy, horrible, abusive way, but just in normal ways. Is it a me trip or is it about the kid?
Mhm.
I was thinking about myself, or I was thinking about the child that God gave me to raise. So again, that's like, it's a very common situation. Hopefully many of us are in or have been in or will be in, but it really is in a small level. There's a lot of power in that relationship. It's very easy to make it a you trip. And it's very important to remember, no, I was given this child by God. I was given this child to help educate this child, to raise this child, that this child should be a beautiful, moral, ethical Noahide, bringing light to the world. And I have to put that in front of my ego trips.
Mhm.
Because it's very easy that a child becomes just part of your ego. Oh, my child is so successful, or, oh, I push my child to do this or that. Why? Because it looks good for me, so to speak. I mean, that sounds like really bad, but in simple words, that's really what's going on. So then instead of it being about your child, it's really just about yourself and your own ego and your own desire for approval and acclaim. That's just a small example of this idea of where it can become about you and not about serving.
Mm.
Something else, which I thought also could be really relevant in our lives, is the sages say that when you're judging, you shouldn't put more significance in judging something that seemingly is more significant. Like, here's a judge. So here's a case in front of him of thousands, tens of thousands of dollars. Here's a case with a very small amount of money. Well, it's like not really important. Like, this case is really important, and that case is not really so important. And sages say, no, the judge, including the Noahide judge, has to look at every case with the same value. He has to give everything the same weight. He can't, again, this goes back to the same thing. He can't prioritize something that has a bigger dollar tag attached to it. Not that he's personally getting the money. This isn't about a bribe, but this is just, again, our natural inclination to give more significance to something that's associated with more money. So even though, again, I'm not getting more money out of it, it's got nothing to do with me personally. I'm not being bribed here. I'm judging a case. I'm judging a case between two people arguing over $100. I'm judging a case between two people arguing over $5 million. Neither way am I getting the money. But as a human being, well, this is a $5 million situation. So I view it as very important. This is a $100 situation. It's a small change, like whatever. When I have time, I'm going to get to it. And again, it's just, again, goes back to this natural human inclination to prioritize money, people that have money, and situations with money over not. I'm just gonna, I see someone's at my door. Just 1 second. It's not only money, but it's certain, like I'm thinking for myself as a teacher, and I give classes every night, basically. So as a teacher, it's very easy to say, oh, this class, I have, X number of attendees. I have a lot of people that are coming. It's very important. I should prepare well. Oh, this class, I know for whatever reason, there's not so many people coming. It's a small class. All right, I can get by without really preparing too much. No, that's the same thing. That's like not being totally ethical in your role. That's giving away to something unfairly. You see why I'm making the connection? It's the same way, like this judge is saying, this is an important case, so I'm going to prioritize it. This is, oh, I have time, I'll do it. I mean, I'm going to be an honest judge and I'm going to take care of that case also, but obviously it's not so important. So they're saying, I'm giving it to my own world as a teacher, saying, oh, this is a large class, or that's an important class. I want to really prepare well for that class. Oh, this is a small class. I can wing it. So if you could think in your own life, I just gave an example in my life, a person can think in their own life where, again, we're sometimes not fair. We're not treating something fairly because it seems less important in our eyes. Like the big money versus the small money, or the lot of students versus the little students. People can think in their world of situations that, like, they manage to say that's not so important, and therefore they don't give it their same attention or effort or priority that they would something else that they have decided is more important. And we can see something in their world that resonates with that concept. We have to be careful for it. Well, I don't think I'm the only one that has that type of situation, but that just came to me in my head, in my world. It's not only in night classes, I mean, in many situations where numbers could create a sense of significant or non-significant. You know, you're having this situation with more, you're having a party with a lot of people, you're having a party with very few. Okay, it's not such a big deal. I could just get by. Oh, but this is like important because there's a lot of people coming, so I'm going to focus on it and give it more attention. So again, thinking just like we're talking here about big money versus small money, big numbers versus small numbers. In your own world, also looking at, there are times when I'm not giving something the attention it really deserves because I've decided it's unimportant. And of course, the idea is that we should never devalue something. You should not say something is unimportant. There's a story with Lubavitcher Rebbe that there's a few stories along this line. I'm going to say one story. A person, a representative of the Rebbe, an emissary of the Rebbe, he was making something, whatever, I don't remember, some big event for something. Maybe it was Hanukkah and he was making a big Hanukkah party. I don't remember. And, you know, he advertised and did all the food and everything. And he's waiting and nobody showed up. And he's waiting and waiting and waiting. And like literally nobody was there. And finally one guy came and the guy like looked around, like he was like outside. He sees no cars, no nothing. And he sees the rabbi and he says, oh, is there a Hanukkah party? Because I don't know what it was. I don't remember. Oh, is there a Hanukkah party here now? And I already said, no, it got canceled. And the guy was like, okay, and he left. And then later, the rabbi wrote in a report to the Rebbe about the evening. I don't know if the rabbi included this detail. I don't remember. But the answer he got back from the Rebbe was very strong. And the Rebbe said basically that a person could have a situation when you have an event. I don't remember the Rebbe's number, so I'm making up my own numbers. So I'm going to give the concept the Rebbe, but I'm making up my own numbers. That you could have an event, and let's say, I don't know, let's say you're giving a lecture and like 500 people come. So the 500, only 100 actually listen to the lecture anyway. And of the 100, only 50 actually understand the lecture. And of the 50 that understand it, only 20 take it to heart. And of the 20 that take it to heart, one person actually walks away and is changed because of it. So you had 500 people there and one person walked away, actually changed because of the event. The Rebbe said here that one person came to your door. You know, you didn't have to get distracted by the other 499 and you sent him away. So I've had this situation in my own world, sometimes as teaching, where one person comes to a class and, there's that sense of saying like, oh my gosh, I mean, it happened to me even like this past week. I mean, in the end, other people came, I think because it was Wednesday, the eve of Thanksgiving in America. So it took a while till people showed up to the class. And the woman's like, oh, like, just take the night off. You're going to give a class just for me? And I'm like, of course. I mean, what's the question? If this is meant to be a class between me and you, great, let's learn. And I've had, pre-COVID days when classes were in person, where I've literally sometimes had, I mean, very rarely, of course, one person shows up. And there's that sense of like, oh my gosh, we're not doing this all for one person. It's like, how do I know? How do I know? Maybe that's the one person. If there were 50 people here, that's the one person this was for. I remember once, it wasn't a class, but sort of similar. It was Sukkot. And I'd invited a lot of people to a meal. None of them showed up. It was a holiday. None of them could even tell me they weren't coming because I don't look at my phone on the holiday. So none of them showed up. And my husband brought home from synagogue like a quiet guy that if he was sitting at my meal with a bunch of other people, I would have totally not noticed him. Obviously, I would have fed him nicely, but he wouldn't have been like the center of attention. Well, here, no other guests were there. So he really was. And things happened at the meal. And I saw it really was. And I really didn't walk away with the meal feeling bad. I really felt, okay, God, I thought I was making this meal for those people. Guess what? I was actually making the meal for this one person. This one person was the reason I made this meal. And if the other people had come, he wouldn't have gotten what he needed. So you worked it out that none of them showed up. And actually the person who the meal was for did show up and he got what he needed. So it's all this mindset. I'm giving a lot of my own personal examples. Everyone else came up with examples, but I guess I really, maybe there's something I see a lot in my own life, that it's so easy for us to like prioritize bigger numbers as versus small numbers, understanding, that one person that shows up. Well, and I've always felt that I'm saying when I have a very small turnout at something, I'm like, this is who it's for. Maybe there'd be a lot of other people. These people who it was for wouldn't get what they needed. So God, just make sure nobody else showed up besides the people that it's for. And that's the ones you focus on. There's a reverse story of a Lubavitcher emissary in Australia. And when he first came there, he came shortly before the holidays. And for Sukkot, for Sukkot, he made a big event and only one person showed up. Literally one person showed up. Now this guy had he was a very powerful person. He's passed away, but he was a very powerful person. So instead of being like the guy in the other story who's like embarrassed and like, no, like we canceled the party, he brought him in and he gave a big speech and then he's talking to hundreds of people. He's talking to one person. He told the band to play and he and the guy danced and whatever. And of course, after the guy left, he felt really bad. Whatever. A year later, now he's been here for another year in Melbourne and he's like, well, now I have a lot of connections. Now I know loads of people. So he made an even bigger event, spent even more money on advertising, had an even bigger band, even better food. And again, for some reason, only one person showed up. The same guy that had showed up the year before. He was the only person that showed up 2 years in a row. And the guy just like pretended like it was fine, gave this huge speech, danced with him, ate with him, talked with him. And he says from this one guy, he built all of the institutions that he built in Melbourne, Australia. He was the one it was for, and he wasn't distracted. No one else was there but him. So maybe my rambling on this subject is sparking you in your own head to think of how this applies to you. Like Danielle said, sometimes at meetings, at work, how you sometimes prioritize. It could be big money versus small money, big number of people versus small number of people. But again, the law is saying, no, we're not supposed to make something smaller or something bigger. We're supposed to give equal weight and attention and appreciation to everything and everyone. Just do one more. I know it's a little bit late, but I'm gonna do this one last one. So a judge is forbidden to delay his judgment, meaning he hears the case and then he has to judge it. He has to give the judgment. And because sometimes when you do so, it really gives pain to the people that are waiting to hear the judgment. And if you, again, we're not saying because it takes you time to figure it out, but we're saying a person who's sort of like delaying and like procrastinating, not prioritizing it, making other things first, or maybe deliberately wanting to make someone wait to hear the answer. And I thought this also could be very relevant, but we're not going to spend time talking about it because it's late, but just as a thought for yourself, do you ever sometimes delay something, unnecessarily push something off that gives pain to someone else by your delaying? You know, because you delayed it, because you pushed it off, and someone else is like needing to get an answer. Like, again, this is maybe in my world only, but I'll give an example in my world is in the world of arranged matchmaking and meeting. So if one side is interested in going out with the other side, and the other side, you know, takes a long time before they say yes or no. You know, they're taking their time. They're, you know, not rushing. They've got other things going on in their life. When they get to it, they get to it, which can cause a lot of pain to the other person. They just want to know, yes or no, I want to move on in life. So this is wrong. You have to, like, whatever your answer is, just give it so the other person can move on. So that's, again, I know it's late, but just putting out another idea of where sometimes things, we all have a lot of power. We all impact other people. We all impact other worlds, other lives, and trying to be very sensitive, like we're saying about the judge, very cognizant of the value of people, of the feelings of people, of the worth of people, and really treating people, every single individual person, whoever they are, like every person deserves to be treated. That's really, to me, the overarching idea of all of these laws. Thank you so much for joining. So I will wait to hear from Danielle. I guess she'll figure it out. So again, the question is, because next week I cannot make it at 7:30, but I could do it if it was 8:30. So let me know if that works for you. Have a wonderful week. Thank you so much for joining.
You.